Greetings, friends. Yes, Bodhi. Come on, lay down. Lay down, puppy. Good boy. Let me first address the timing of these Wednesday talks. I've always had them scheduled for noontime on Wednesday, and I've been taking a little license with that, and I'll continue to do so in the future. I need a little bit more flexible schedule on my Wednesdays now. So I'll be recording them sometime Wednesday morning, almost always before noon or right at noon. And as soon as I complete them, I'll post them. So it may be as early as this. It's about 9:30 here on the East Coast of the United States. It may be earlier. I was considering doing them right after my, I usually sit around 5 a.m. So we'll see, but it'll always be posted on a Wednesday. This week we're talking about, and I'm giving 4 talks, including this one, on the Buddha's meaning of emptiness. The last night we looked at the Cula-Sunnata Sutta, and that video and audio has been posted. Today I'm just going to read a portion of the Maha Sutta, which addresses emptiness in a significantly different way. Just because they're both called suttas on Sanatta, Cula-Sunnata, and the Maha Sanatta, they're and the Buddha's teachings on emptiness is consistent, but the situation that he's using is quite different, and this is an interesting one. And I'm just reading a portion, and I'll comment on a portion towards the end of the sutta, and our Saturday class will include the entire sutta. So the Buddha is speaking with Ananda, and prior to this, he goes into a rather lengthy exposition of the importance of establishing seclusion as our Dhamma practice, and to not cling to groups to establish our practice. And that doesn't mean to be part of a sangha. It means to not associate yourself, another word for clinging, with groups or even individuals that are not well focused on the Dhamma, because of course that's going to affect the Dhamma. The Buddha was never, and this comes up a few times, the Buddha wasn't an isolationist. He just understood the powerful nature of ignorance and how a mind rooted in ignorance will create very subtle but again very powerful strategies to continue to ignore its own ignorance. And the most expedient way that type of mind can continue to ignore its own ignorance is to find other people whose understanding of, I'm not talking about ignorance in general, I'm talking about ignorance of Four Noble Truths. So when we associate with groups, no matter how well-meaning or possibly not well-meaning, we've certainly seen some very hurtful so-called sanghas develop over the years, right, since Buddhism had moved to the West and continuing till today. It's very unfortunate, but it points to being very, very careful that if we are authentic Dhamma practitioners, that we associate with people and groups that are actually practicing what the Buddha taught. And if that's not a concern, then that's fine. Then we're free to associate. We're always free to associate with whoever and whatever we want to. But if we want to develop the Buddha's Dhamma, we associate with teachers and practitioners that are actually studying that. It just simply makes sense. And it's a theme that the Buddha constantly referred back to. All of the suttas I've read, and I've read a great portion of them, that's almost an underlying theme in every single sutta, the importance of practicing an authentic Dhamma. And when I say an authentic Dhamma, I mean a Dhamma that we know that an awakened human being taught as preserved in the Sutta Pitaka. So that's the kind of the background that leads to this. And again, the Buddha is speaking to Ananda, his cousin. Ananda, develop refined mindfulness of the sixth sense base to understand how contact with the senses creates disturbance and inflames passion. Ask yourself if there is any disturbance formed by engagement in self-identification with regard to contact at the sixth sense base. If upon mindful reflection you find that disturbance has arisen from contact, then you will know that you are not empty of craving and clinging. So again, a very clear instruction that is missed if we don't study the suttas or learn from a teacher that has. Many people ask, how do I know if I'm progressing? Well, the Buddha tells us right there, and I'll read it again. If upon mindful reflection you find that disturbance has arisen from contact, then you will know that you are not empty of craving and clinging. And this is any disturbance. It's not just a disturbance such as anger or frustration. It could be any type of disturbance that is exciting our minds. And this is one of the reasons why we cling to social interactions and create, and I'll use the word loosely here, we create sanghas that are more of a social event, a weekly dinner with friends, than it is actual Dhamma practice. And the Buddha was talking about this 2,600 years ago. And a way to know if you're progressing in the Dhamma is if your mind is still disturbed and still clinging to associations and objects, events, views, and ideas that have nothing to do with what the Buddha taught. The Buddha continues, but if you find the craving for sensory satisfactions has been abandoned. It's just simple and direct. If we're engaging in the world, but not of the world, and we find that we're able to maintain a calm and peaceful mind, that's how we know that we're practicing an authentic Dhamma. We're practicing it correctly, and it's leading us to the goal of a mind resting in equanimity. The quality of your mind will be well concentrated and empty of any disturbing thoughts. The Buddha continues, the 5 clinging aggregates should be seen as arising and passing away. The 5 clinging aggregates simply describe the ongoing personal experience of suffering rooted in wrong views of 4 noble truths. Form arises and passes away. Feelings arise and pass away. Perceptions arise and pass away. Fabrications arise and pass away. Fabrications are deluded thinking rooted in ignorance, and that deluded thinking arises and passes away. Maintaining refined mindfulness. Any conceit or eye-making that supports the 5 clinging aggregates is now abandoned, and this one is mindful that they have emptied themselves of any disturbance formed by ignorance. In that last line, one is mindful. We understand that you could take the Buddha's entire teaching and bring it down to its essence of being mindful of what is present, and it's equally important to be mindful of what is not present. We understand that ignorance is no longer present. The quality of mind is well concentrated and empty of disturbing thoughts. Again, this is the Buddha's teachings on emptiness. To be empty of ignorance, to be empty of any type of clinging, to be empty of any type of the defilements that have taken hold in our minds. We finally emptied ourselves of all the things that would continue to cause confusion, deluded thinking, and ongoing suffering. This is liberation. This is the Buddha's teachings on emptiness, not to develop some type of amorphous existence called emptiness, where somehow we establish a self in this confusing thing that there's no such thing as a self. There's only emptiness, so we abide in this emptiness or this nothingness. And of course, that type of thinking is simply grasping at a way to continue to establish what the Buddha says we should recognize and abandon, which is self-referential views. So now my self-referential views through self-loathing, and I'll be talking about that at some point, meaning I can't stand myself in this environment that I find it in. So let me project it into something that is a common agreement among many modern Buddhists of this experience of nothingness, or as Nagarjuna would say, nothingness or not nothingness. And when we buy into that through association, it seems reasonable because either a charismatic teacher has taught it this way, or all of our associations decide that this must be true. And it's just a way of reconciling a whole bunch of wrong views in this amorphous emptiness soup. And again, it's just not something the Buddha taught. If this is something that you find useful, and again, I know I sound like I'm dismissing it or denigrating it. I'm simply pointing out that that the brilliance of an awakened human being said that that's not it. And so if we're going to follow this brilliant human being, we should probably follow him. Ananda, the qualities that are developed through the Dhamma are singularly useful in developing understanding of reality. They are noble, they're transcendent, and cannot be affected by ignorance. Again, empty of ignorance. Now, Ananda, what do you think is a proper goal for a disciple even after a rebuke from their teacher? Ananda says, you are our teacher and your Dhamma is our guide. Please explain this statement for our long-term benefit. Ananda, it is not skillful to follow a teacher simply to hear discourses or dogma. And this is what the Buddha is talking about, is now taking your Dhamma practice and making it a substitute for entertainment, making it a substitute for watching YouTube. So you go find a so-called teacher who applies the Buddhist label to what he's teaching, and today we know that could be just about anything. But if the label is there, or even the label of mindfulness, and so let's go listen to what this guy has to say, or this woman, without any careful investigation of is what they're teaching actually in accordance with what the Buddha teaches. And so we spend, not me and not the sanghas, the sangha that I lead, but others, they'll spend their entire Buddhist practice really just substituting entertainment for their own boredom in their life and never achieving anything except really what is constant excitement. And we see this all the time with many Buddhist practitioners, that really what they're teaching is more akin to, not more akin, it's really just it's based on a modern psychological model, which has very, very little, if anything, to do with what the Buddha actually taught. Or the modern psychological model has now influenced the Buddhist practice, and so again, it's more psychology than Dhamma, and that's not to put down psychology; it's just something different. You have done this for a long time and have understood them according to your views. But talk on modesty, contentment, seclusion, non-entanglement, persistence, wisdom, virtue, and concentration. Talk that is scrupulous, conducive to refined mindfulness. That develops directly dispassion, disenchantment, cessation, calm, unbinding, and the direct knowledge and vision of release. It is skillful to attend to this and hold this in mind. This being the case, failure to empty oneself of clinging to ignorant views will lead to the long-term suffering for a teacher or a student or anyone engaged with that Dharma. How does this occur? For a teacher, even dwelling in seclusion, he becomes enamored by offerings of trinkets or praise and falls into the three defilements. We certainly see that in so many modern Buddhist teachers, even those that are trying to put on an air of modesty and cannot help to hold themselves out in some special way, whether it is by the wearing of trinkets or the constantly insisting on the specialness of their understanding. Think of all the different names that we have now applied to different Buddhist practices. The Buddha never, he lived, and remember, he was born a prince in his father's kingdom, but he lived the last 45 years of his life owning 3 robes made out of rags and a single bowl for alms round. That was it. And he never, ever held himself out as anything special, or even his Sangha as anything special. In other words, they didn't find the need to apply some kind of special name to it. They were simply Dhamma practitioners. They were simply followers of the Tathagata. Offers of trinket or praise and falls into the 3 defilements. This can only develop further confusion, deluded thinking, and suffering. There is also the case of a student lacking understanding who imitates that teacher and has failed to empty themselves of clinging to ignorant views and becomes enamored with the trinkets and praise and falls into the 3 defilements. And so that can also be just any type of charismatic practice that overemphasizes how wonderful they are, when having no basis at all in what the Buddha actually taught. And this really is the problem. And I guess you could say that it's one of the main focuses of what I teach. I think it's so important and singularly respectful to an awakened human being to show the brilliance of this human being, and as important to what in following his model, to show what he didn't teach. Because how else will we know the singular Dhamma that an awakened human being taught? The Buddha continues. Then there is a case where one engaged with the Dhamma fails to empty themselves from clinging views. A Tathagata has arisen in the world, a worthy and rightly self-awakened one. Dwelling in seclusion, he avoids becoming enamored by the offerings of trinkets and praise, and does not fall into the three defilements. His mind is calm and empty of disturbance. So recently, we've had another one of the unfortunate Buddhist scandals. This in a well-known Buddhist sangha, where it has been found that one of the founders, or there's few, was constantly engaged in rampant sexual abuse. And again, I feel sorry for anyone who falls into that, and equally sorry for all the people that have been hurt by these practitioners who have no knowledge of the Buddha's Dhamma, and the behavior should be proof enough of that, either for the so-called teacher, the organizer of this particular sect. He has been around, and his father has been around long enough to know, or they should know, that if this type of behavior is still within them, then there must be something terribly wrong with their Dharma practice. Could you imagine if the Buddha, the historical Buddha, had spent 45 years teaching this Dharma, but every place he went, he assaulted people sexually? How far would he go? He wouldn't last a week. And yet modern Buddhist teachers, when they act out in this way, and as long as they have a following, and this goes back many years, I won't name all the teachers, but you could pick, some of the continuing well-established sanghas today, and their teachers were simply sexual predators, and many of them were active alcoholics and drug addicts. And again, I'm not putting them down. I'm a recovered alcoholic and drug addict, but I certainly wouldn't think that it's appropriate for me to teach the Dhamma while I'm drunk or while I'm engaged, and I've never done that, and assaulting my students or coercing them through the trinkets that I carry. So, as a teacher should realize that maybe they don't understand much of the Dhamma if they're able to act that way. So should students should question the Dhamma, that a teacher that acts in this way, why would you want to follow anyone? Except it's often excused away as, well, this teacher is so far advanced that they're beyond the normal human behavior. Well, take a look at the Eightfold Path, and it's particularly right speech, right action, and right livelihood. That's completely ignored in this way. And the Buddha taught that initially to simply establish agreeable behavior, and then to use that as a foundation for developing understanding. So again, it wasn't, I didn't mean to get into that during this talk, but this particular sutta and many of the others speaks directly to that if you're going to associate yourself with the Buddha's Dhamma, you have to actually associate with the Buddha's Dhamma. You have to find a teacher that has studied the Dhamma. You cannot teach the Buddha's teachings unless you study the Buddha's teachings. You're not going to get it from following someone who only practices an adapted, accommodated, or embellished form of Buddhism, and you're certainly not going to get it from any teacher who acts in that way. And to cover up those teachers, or to continue to support teachers like that out of some misguided sense of arrogant understanding and foolish compassion, just continues the suffering that's present in the world. There's a responsibility, I feel, that if we're going to call ourselves Buddhist practitioners, we should practice and act in accordance with how a Buddha taught us to. A student of the Tathagata dwelling in seclusion becomes enamored by offers of trinkets or praise and falls into the three defilements and lives in luxury. This can only develop further confusion, deluded thinking, and suffering. In this regard, Ananda, a Dhamma practitioner who fails to empty themselves of the defilements, the Buddha's teachings on emptiness, can only continue confusion, deluded thinking, and disappointment. Do not engage with the teacher or the Dhamma in opposition. Engage with the teacher and the Dhamma. Now the Buddha is talking about when you found a teacher who is actually teaching the Dhamma, and you know it from simply listening to them and having a at least an intellectual understanding of what the Buddha actually taught. And just to qualify all that, everything the Buddha taught for his 45-year teaching career was taught in the context of what he awakened to, dependent origination, and his very first sutta, the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, the Sutta on the Four Noble Truths, which established the Four Noble Truths as the basis for his teaching. And everything he taught during his teaching career was taught in the context of those two. Do not engage with the teacher or the Dhamma in opposition. Engage with the teacher and the Dhamma with friendliness. That alone will be for your long-term well-being and happiness. And how do students engage in opposition to the teacher? When the teacher teaches the Dhamma with understanding and concern for the student's well-being. Now think about some of these sexual predators that have been so prevalent in modern Buddhism. Is that for the student's well-being? That alone should be enough to say this person has nothing to offer me. But the students do not listen or apply themselves to understanding. They stray from the Dhamma. This is how students oppose the teacher. In other words, when you have if you're lucky enough to find a true Dhamma teacher today, respect that teacher. Don't come to that teacher with opposition. Listen to him. And how do students engage with the teacher and the Dhamma in friendliness? When a teacher teaches the authentic Dhamma with understanding and concern for the student's well-being, and the students listen and apply themselves to understanding, they do not stray from the teacher or the Dhamma. This is how students engage with the teacher in friendliness and not in opposition. Ananda, engage with me and the Dhamma in friendliness. This will be for your long-term well-being and happiness. I will not hover over you, but I will remind you again and again of the Dhamma. That's the teacher's role, to not hover over you, but when he knows that you're straying from the Dhamma, to remind you over and over and over again. And my students certainly know that I can be rather repetitive with the basics of the Dhamma, always referring back to the true meaning of mindfulness, always referring back to the path, the only path that Buddha taught, the Eightfold Path, always referring back to the only meditation method that the Buddha taught, and taught so clearly in the beginning of the Satipatthana Sutta, meaning shamatha vipassana meditation. What is not essential will be gone, and what is essential will remain. Again, a very simplified and rarefied Dhamma, not embellished with all the things that have been added. It's pure, it's direct. This is what was said, and Ananda was delighted in the Buddha's words. That's the end of the sutta. And so, again, those of you that have listened to me and listened to some of my talks, and I'll admit that many of you listen to me and don't agree, and that's okay. I'm not trying to convince or coerce anybody, but what I am saying, if you're going to be a Buddhist practitioner in 2018, you might want to study what the Buddha taught 2,600 years ago, and then decide if that is enough. I can tell you from many, many years of personal experience and seeing the transformation in so many of my students, whether in our center in Frenchtown or online, that it's an authentic Dhamma. The proof is in the pudding. So thank you for listening. And again, these in the future, these talks are probably going to be on a rather floating schedule, but I will post them on Wednesday morning. Thank you for joining me. Oh, and by the way, if you find benefit from these talks, please consider a donation at becoming-buddha.com. Thank you. Peace. Oops.